Hello and welcome to Profiles and Issues, the cable television talk show that gives you in-depth interviews with prominent people in the news. I'm your host, Dennis Rudin. Our profile and guest for this program is Mondaire Jones, Democratic candidate for Congress in the 17th Congressional District. This seat is currently being held by Nita Lowey, who announced this past October that she would be retiring at the end of the year after 31 years of distinguished service. This district currently includes portions of central and northwestern Westchester County, including White Plains, Greenburgh, Chappaqua, Mount Kisco, Ossining, Peekskill, Dobbs Ferry, Pleasantville, Tarrytown, Cortland, Yorktown Heights, Elmsford, Hartsdale, and all of Rockland County. Mondaire Jones is 32 years old and is a resident of South Nyack, New York. He was born and raised in Section 8 housing and lived on food stamps in the village of Spring Valley by a single mother who worked multiple jobs to provide for her family. Mondaire attended public schools in East Ramapo and is a lifelong member of the First Baptist Church of Spring Valley. He became a political activist in high school by joining the Spring Valley NAACP Youth Council to stop the defeat of the East Ramapo public school budget by registering voters. As a student at Stanford University, Harvard Law School, and later as an attorney, Mr. Jones championed numerous progressive causes, from faculty and graduate student diversity to a living wage for dining hall and maintenance workers. He has fought against racial profiling and for defendants who cannot afford representation and have been victims of racial discrimination and mass incarceration. Mondaire Jones served in the Obama administration in the Office of Legal Policy at the Department of Justice, where he worked on judicial nominations for the White House and co-authored a report to Attorney General Holder on reducing the recidivism of people leaving federal prisons and helping them rejoin. In past years, he has worked in Westchester County's Law Department as a legal advisor to the county executive, the Board of Legislators, and the Human Rights Commission. He also works with young people as a co-founder of the nonprofit Rising Leaders Incorporated group that teaches underserved middle school students leadership skills. He has announced that he is openly gay and was recently endorsed by United States Senator and former Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren, as well as Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts. Mondaire Jones, welcome to Profiles and Issues.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
In looking at your resume, you're 32. Boy, would I love to be 32 again, but you have done so much in your life. And the challenges that you faced is really inspiring, and I say that also as a teacher who works with young people. I think that's a fantastic role model that you've been for them.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. Sometimes I forget the importance of representation in the day-to-day of campaigning until you have these conversations with younger people who say, "I'm so proud of you. You're giving me hope about what it is that I can achieve if I just put my mind to it."
Now, I know there are many issues out there, but as it pertains to you and what you hope to accomplish by running, what made you decide to run for Congress in 2020?
Yeah. I have long felt that the government does not work for all people. It works for a select few people, frankly, who already have a lot of advantages in our society. And so for me, when I think of my upbringing, for example, and I say to folks, as this race has gotten crowded, I'm running for Congress because for me, policy is personal. Not because when I was growing up, somebody always told me I'd be a member of Congress. Not because I have a lot of money, which I do not, in the way that perhaps some of my other competitors do in this primary, and so why not just run for Congress? I'm running for Congress because these issues matter greatly to me, and these are things that reflect my lived experiences. When I was growing up in Section 8 housing and on food stamps, and my mom still needed to work multiple jobs just to provide for our family, something like a $15 minimum wage at the federal level is deeply important to me. I don't think anyone should have to work multiple full-time jobs in order to be able to put food on the table for their family. When I think of something like universal child care, I think of the fact that when my mom was off working, my grandmother took me to work with her when she was cleaning homes in places like Hillcrest and in Congress because daycare was too expensive. And so we need to make sure that we have someone in office who's going to fight for working people, and that's the kind of representation that I hope to provide.
I think, your aspirations are very noble, but since you brought up the universal health care, I've got to add, well, the child care doesn't seem to be controversial, but the universal health care is, and I would like you to explain it to the people who find it controversial, okay? Because I try to bring in all sides so that everybody understands what's going on.
Yeah.
Many people, I haven't found many people arguing against health care, but what they question about the universal health care, that's the one where you make where you are no longer on Obamacare, right? But you transition to what do you call it?
It's basically the government is the insurer under such a system as a single payer system.
Right, the single payer. But the problem that some people say is, if I've worked with a union, and you're talking about working people.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, maybe 20, 30 years ago, white collar jobs were not considered in the same category. But there are a lot of people in white-collar jobs that are really struggling. If you look at the statistics in Westchester County, and I'm sure even in Rockland, they have to, especially those that their children are of age where they want to go to either vocational or college, and not everybody is gifted to get an academic scholarship or or an athletic scholarship. These people are just struggling to hold on. So if you go for universal, a lot of people say, then I'll lose my health benefits that my union worked to give me, or I'm going to lose my doctor. That's two of the issues. You can start on that.
Yeah, you just said a lot, and so let me start by laying a foundation, if you don't mind. We are paying on an annual basis as a society, as American society, an increasingly unsustainable amount of money in terms of the cost of health care. And yet, more than 30 million people in this country are uninsured. I happen to take the position that health care is a human right in a nation as wealthy as our own. And of course, I was part of the Obama administration when we could not even get a public option passed.
Right.
And I tell everybody, if that is the best that Democrats can do, then sure, I will be a reliable vote for a public option. But I'm grateful for the leadership of people like Congresswoman Nita Lowey, who signed on to a Medicare for All bill in 2017. That was John Conyers' bill. May he rest in peace. And she signed on again in 2019 to Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All single-payer bill. Under a single-payer system, literally everybody would be insured, whereas under a public option system, you'd still have as many as 10 million Americans uninsured.
But couldn't those people go to Obamacare right now for the present, those that are poor that can't afford it, and the others could still keep their current plans?
No, if you have, under any system where you have to buy into something and you are unable to afford that, then you're out of luck. And that's why under a public option system where the government is providing something that would compete with the private insurance industry, it's still going to leave 10 million people who are incapable of paying the kinds of funds that are going to be required to meet the cost of necessary medical care. But here's a thing that I want people to understand about a single-payer system. Under a single-payer system, the quality of your health insurance does not decrease. In fact, you get to choose your doctor. What I want a lot of people to understand is that tomorrow Blue Cross Blue Shield could send you a letter and say, well, you're no longer in network, and then you have to forfeit your choice. Under a single payer system, you get to keep your doctor. There's no such thing as in network and out of network. The annual cost of prescription drugs would be capped at $200, and coverage would be expanded to include things like mental health services and long-term care, especially for our seniors. Also vision and dental. And the overall cost of care on an annual basis for 95% of Americans would actually be lower than what it is today that they're paying. So I think this is, and there would be no premiums, no deductibles, and no copays.
Yeah, but the other end of it, you know, you have massive tax increases for the group that ends up paying most of the taxes, and that is the middle class. You know, and I mean, that's a fact. The middle class, you know, the poor don't have the money. I understand that. And the rich have lawyers who have all these tax devices and everything, tax shelters. And it's not that that I'm against it or the voices that I'm bringing to this little debate. And we really could spend the whole time, which we can't. But the point that I'm trying to make is, why not take it in steps? You were in the Obama administration. If you remember when Obama finally got his health care package passed, in order for him to get it passed, he had to make special deals with Democrats
Absolutely.
in blue dog states.
Absolutely.
Because their constituency, you know, it just wasn't palatable, let alone for the Republicans. He had to do it in stages. And
Yeah.
you may not remember this, I do, but when Hillary Clinton tried to do it in the Clinton
in the
administration,
90s,
and she tried to rush the whole thing, it just evaporated. And so, and if you're going to be in Congress, you know, the game is how many votes do you get?
Absolutely.
You know, so
Absolutely.
all I'm saying is I think it's an easiest job to sell if you, I'm not saying you shouldn't have that as a final goal, but maybe you take it in like increments instead of
So there are two things I want to discuss in response to that. Just a quick clarification: the overall cost of care on an annual basis for literally 95% of Americans would be lower than what it is today, and so that's why this discussion on the presidential debate stage on the Democratic side, I think, has been a little bit intellectually dishonest in terms of the questions that have been posed to candidates like Elizabeth Warren, for example. Oh, well, won't middle class taxes increase? Well, if middle class taxes are slightly increasing, but you're no longer paying premiums, deductibles, and copays, and your annual cost of prescription drugs are capped at $200, then you're paying less on an annual basis than what you're currently paying. So I want to be very clear about that. But to your point about pragmatism,
that's for the health. Look, yes, your health costs are going to be less, but your taxes are going to go up. So on one hand, you're taking the money out of one pocket and you're putting it in another.
And you are saving overall on an annual basis. And I want to get to your point about pragmatism.
Right. Yeah.
I agree with you. So many members of the House Democratic Caucus and in the Senate have said, you know what? I'm not in support of a single-payer system, but I'll be in support of a public option. And that's why I said to you, if the best Democrats can get done is a public option, then I'm going to be a reliable yes on that, because I want to get something rather than getting nothing at all.
Okay.
And by the way, at least one of the presidential candidates has said, well, former presidential candidate now, Elizabeth Warren, for example, the way you get this done is not by doing single-payer overnight, right? We know that we simply cannot do that overnight. So many people in Congress on the Democratic side have already said, I'm not there yet. But we can be fighting for it, and in the meantime, we can get something like a public option as an interim step.
Okay, great. I'll have to have you back sometime, or we'll just spend half or the whole program just trying to talk about health. All right. What committees would you like to serve on?
Thank you for asking that. The environment is a huge deal to me, and I'm a big proponent of something called a Green New Deal. So we don't have much time. The climate crisis is already here. It is an existential question. I like to tell folks there are so many things in this campaign I'm talking about that some of my opponents are not talking about. But none of that matters so much if we don't have a planet that we can inhabit. And I think even people of a different generation feel that way because they want to make sure that their children and their children's children have a future that is insured for them. And so for me, as applied to Westchester and Rockland counties, I think we need to invest in transportation. We know that the transportation sector is the single biggest contributor to carbon emissions globally and nationally. And so if you're in Rockland County, for example, we need a one-seat train from Rockland into Westchester and also into Manhattan in the way that folks have in the form of a Metro North. And we know that we used to have light rail in places like Ossining and in Peekskill. I think we need to bring that back, and we need to wean ourselves off of reliance on driving our own cars and even taking the bus. We know that rail is so much more environmentally friendly, for example. I want to be on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and I also want to be on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I think we need to transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to a renewable energy-based economy.
Okay, I just want to hold that note and take that point. I attended last year a meeting of the energy, Con Edison said here in Westchester that they have no power lines for brand new businesses coming in. And granted, it's only my perception. I attended the meeting, and the meeting was entitled, Alternative Plans. They have nothing. They're stalling, they're dragging their feet because they want to make as much money as they can off of the old system. You have any insight if you get into Congress that you can push them? And granted, it's not a general federal issue, but I'm just desperate for answers.
And I feel your pain, and I certainly am hearing this every day when I'm out on the campaign trail. We need leadership in Congress that is going to be a partner to activists who have been doing the work of holding these private companies accountable and helping educate largely the community about how to be environmentally friendly. How to transition from a fossil fuel-based enterprise to renewable energy sources. And so when it comes to something like Con Edison, I think to myself, well, we need more members of Congress who are going to be standing up and using their stature and the bully pulpit to speak out against rate increases and things like that, but also who are going to work in earnest to mobilize the federal government to decarbonize our economy. A carbon tax, as one of my opponents has been saying a lot in this race, that's insufficient. When you hear Shell Oil and BP, when you see that they come, and Republican Senator John Cornyn in Texas, when you see that they come out in support of a carbon tax, you ought to stop and think to you, what am I missing here? It's because a carbon tax is a cost that can be passed on to consumers. A carbon tax is something that when you go to the gas station, you'll just be paying more in gas as an average consumer. Well, Green New Deal is that train that gets you from point A to point B, and hopefully it's powered, it's through renewable energy sources and it's electric, right? And I think that's what we got to be striving for along the way.
Okay, thank you.
And I also want to be on the Judiciary Committee because I'm kind of a nerd. I love the Constitution. As an attorney, I'm deeply committed to it. I am disturbed by what has happened under this president and this Supreme Court, frankly. I think we need to do things like codify reproductive rights so that they can never be taken away by a Supreme Court that changes its interpretation of the Constitution depending on who's on the Supreme Court. I think we need to add protections to our federal anti-discrimination laws for members of the LGBTQ plus community, of which, as you mentioned, I'm a part. And I think we need to bolster the Voting Rights Act, which has been cut down repeatedly by the Supreme Court. So those are some of the reasons why I want to be on the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I could have a full program with you on that. It's, just one thing that I'm going to say, and then we're going to have to move on. We're supposed to have, like you say, checks and balances. And instead, Trump has started this, and I hate to say, I hope the Democrats don't take his lead. I don't want them going after Supreme Court justices, whether you like their background or not. Once they're on the committee, let's keep it separate. They have lifelong appointments. Attacking them is not gonna make your case favorable or not. Do you agree as a lawyer or not?
I think it depends on the criticism, right? So I don't think there's anything
By
wrong with
attacking them personally.
Oh,
by
no.
name.
Yeah.
I don't mean the decision.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the name.
I agree with you there. I don't think we need to be personally attacking members of the Supreme Court. I think it is enough to be talking about the poor decisions that have been rendered over the past several decades from the Supreme Court, which is not reflective of the lived experiences of everyday people in this society.
Yeah, and the bottom line is if votes had been different just a little bit, you wouldn't be where we are today.
Yeah.
So the goal goes back to the ballot.
If Obama had been able to get Merrick Garland confirmed.
Yeah. Okay. Over the last several months, there has been a rise in ethnic and religious hate crimes in both Westchester and Rockland County, especially anti-Semitism. What actions would you take on the federal level to help combat these violent offenses?
Yeah. This is really personal for me. I grew up just a few miles away from Muncie in the village of Spring Valley. And today I live in South Nyack, which is still only a few miles away from Muncie. I was devastated and heartbroken by what happened in my home community of Rockland County. And it's also been happening in Westchester County, by the way. There has been a strong uptick in acts of anti-Semitism and other forms of white nationalism that has coincided with the election of President Donald Trump. And so, on the Westchester side, as a lawyer for Westchester County, one of my roles was a legal advisor to the Westchester County Human Rights Commission. And so I worked very closely with the members of the Westchester County Human Rights Commission to develop a response to the rise of what we call hate incidents. And on the Rockland County side, which is where I was born and raised and where I live today, I wrote an op-ed after that happened. It was about the historic relationship between the black community, of which I'm a part, obviously, and the Jewish community, dating as far back as the Civil Rights Movement. When you think of the freedom riders like Schirmer and Goodman, right?
Right.
People who risked their lives for the voting rights, Jewish people who risked their lives to obtain voting rights. And Cheney, exactly.
Right. I was living then,
yeah. Yeah. And that is the kind of coalition building that I hope to be able to obtain as someone who is from the black community, and we need to be making sure that we are working together and standing uniformly and in unison against white nationalism.
All right, due to time, let me ask you this question.
Oh, yeah.
It's on track with this.
Yeah.
If elected to Congress, would Congress be able to establish an interagency task force on hate crimes?
Yes. I think it absolutely should be doing that. I gotta get elected first. You know what else we need? We need more security assistance for synagogues and black churches and even mosques, which we don't talk enough about. We also need to make sure that we are educating our children about why it is that we should be respectful and loving of one another and see our own humanity in other people, right?
In the
schools, absolutely.
Public schools. Yeah, I'm just going to have to move you along because we're just losing it to time. Do you support Resolution 246 as proposed by Chairman Eliot Engel, House Foreign Affairs Committee, that opposes efforts to delegitimize the State of Israel and boycott, divest, and sanction the Israeli products and goods?
Yeah, I have opposed the so-called BDS movement from as far back as college when people tried to pressure me to support a resolution calling on Stanford University's Board of Trustees to divest from companies doing business with Israel. I don't think that's fair to Israel, and that's not something that I support.
Okay, thank you. Again, there's a lot. That area of the world is a mess. I just got back from there a couple of months ago, and yeah, there's a lot that we could talk about. Okay, what is your opinion on the House and Senate's recent votes forbidding President Trump from attacking Iran unless there is an imminent threat or Congress declares war?
I think it's one of the best things that Congress could have done. Congress, the powers of Congress are established in Article 1 of the Constitution. The framers thought Congress was so important that it put the powers of Congress in Article 1, not Article 2 or Article 3. And so unfortunately, under this president and under prior presidents, I think the presidents have had way too much power in the area of foreign affairs, and Congress is finally starting to reassert itself. The fact that we are, President Trump is claiming to be in Iran and elsewhere in the region on the basis of the authorization for the use of military force with respect to the war in Iraq, the war on terror in the early 2000s,
Right.
something that was nearly 2 decades ago now, is unconscionable to me. He should, and any other president, not just this president, but I want to be fair
Right.
to both parties, presidents should be going back to Congress and getting authorization to wage war. That is the accountability that we need.
Yeah, and that's my follow-up about checks and balances. Do you agree or not that as a result of the outcome of the impeachment proceedings, it appears the House of Representatives has at least temporarily declined with regard to checks and balances over the executive branch? And if you want specifics, hostile witnesses no longer feel compelled to come before Congress because the president threatens them or protects them.
Yeah.
And also the fact that that the president was given funds to be allocated in the Ukraine affair, and he did what he wanted.
Yeah. We have seen Congress's role be dismantled by this president. I think impeachment was a fantastic thing. I think it put on the record for the American public to see, and you saw public opinion go up. Do you think the president should be impeached and convicted? Over a majority, over 50% of the American public. And so I think we saw that the impeachment proceedings were good in the terms of educating the American public about what this president and his enablers in Congress have been doing. Now, unfortunately, the Senate is not cooperative. To me, it should not be a partisan issue. I think what this president has done is very clear in terms of his violation of both the Constitution and federal statutes. I think overall impeachment was a great thing, and I think that when Democrats flip the Senate and when we get this president out of the Oval Office, you're going to see more sanity restored to the United States Congress.
I remember a time when Democrats and Republicans could get along. I don't mean that they voted together, but they were civil and they could converse. And yet, even if they came from different sides of the tracks, either economically, politically, whatever, could you see yourself sitting down with a Republican conservative from, down south and trying to find common ground on any issue?
Absolutely. Absolutely I would. And shame on me if I couldn't do that. I am someone who always believes that we have more has always believed that we have more in common than we do that separates us. And so I think of the SALT deduction, for example.
Okay.
A huge priority of mine is lifting that $10,000 cap on the SALT deduction that went into place in December 2017 and restoring that. And so I think to myself, surely my Republican colleagues in New York and in New Jersey and in Connecticut and in California would work alongside me to lift that $10,000 cap and put money back into the pockets of middle-class families in Westchester and in Rockland counties.
Right.
That is just one area. And there are plenty of Republicans who believe in science and who believe in climate change, and I want to work with them on aspects of the Green New Deal as well.
Okay. We only have about a minute, and I'm giving you a minute and a half, but just do whatever you can on this question because it's important. You think the future of NATO, our alliance system, and our position as a world power is in jeopardy because of the way President Trump conducts foreign policy, meaning he meets directly with world leaders and dictators, not having preconditions, and he doesn't consult with government advisors. They're specialized from the State Department and different branches.
Yeah, I want to separate those two things. Barack Obama got into trouble in the 2008 primary against Hillary Clinton for saying that he would meet with certain leaders without preconditions. So I don't think that we should be putting that off the table, but I think there should be an intelligence and a strategy behind it, and both of those things are absent in the conduct of President Trump. He should absolutely be speaking to his experts in the State Department and at the Defense Department, in particular at the State Department, frankly, which I think has demoralized. If you speak to the average person, the rank and file members of the State Department, they've seen their budget, by the way, gutted over the past several decades. And so I think that we need someone who is respectful of America's role in the international sphere, who embraces American leadership, because the truth is, if you ever travel abroad, for all the the things that people might say about the United States, they do look to us for leadership. They really do.
Okay.
They look to us for inspiration and encouragement and safety. And I think we need to be showing leadership. We need to honor our international commitments and stop withdrawing from things like the Paris Climate Accord, which would help to stave off global warming, this existential crisis that I mentioned earlier. And that starts with getting a new president in the Oval Office, because this one's not up to it.
Yeah. Look, it's been a pleasure to have you on our program. I wish you the best in your campaign, and hopefully you will come back and see us. Okay.
I would like that very much. Thank you for having me on.
And I apologize to my audience because we could have gone on for hours. Thank you.
Next time.
Right. All of our programs can be seen at no charge on demand on your computer or iPhone at any time on our website at www.thedennisrudenshow.com or www.profilesinissues.com. Please send your comments about the program, interact with us, and learn about issues on our Facebook pages at facebook.com/The Dennis Rudin Show. All of our programs are broadcast on Optimum Cablevision and Verizon Fios. Check your local cable calendar for time, day, and channel. This is Dennis Rudin saying so long for Profiles and Issues.